If there's one man who ruled late night like a king and kept chaos in a chokehold, it was Johnny Carson. But even kings slip. For 30 years, The Tonight Show felt bulletproof until something went off script. Sometimes it was a guest, sometimes an animal, sometimes Johnny himself. But every time, it was unforgettable. We're talking about the moments where control cracked, censors panicked, and the man behind the desk? He didn't know what was coming next either. From a monkey climbing Johnny's head, to celebrities bombing so hard you could hear the silence, to one guest so wild, Johnny literally left his own show mid-taping. These 16 moments aren't just funny, they're chaotic, emotional, raw, and yes, absolutely insane. And if you think we're starting with the wildest, think again. 8 sparked a national backlash. 2-3 made Johnny cry. And 1, it broke every rule in live television. So let's count down the 16 most insane moments on Johnny Carson, from surprise to completely out of control. Number 16. Sammy Davis Jr.'s rapid-fire impressions. This one didn't need chaos or controversy, just talent so overwhelming, it stunned even Johnny. Sammy Davis Jr. was already a legend when he sat down with Carson that night. But nobody expected what happened next. With zero setup, no band cues, and no warning, Sammy suddenly launched into a flurry of dead-on impressions. Frank Sinatra, Jerry Lewis, Jimmy Stewart, one after another, flawless, each lasting only seconds. It wasn't just voices, he nailed the posture, the timing, the pauses. It felt like a dozen people sharing the same body. And Johnny? He was speechless. At first, he chuckled, then leaned in, then laughed so hard he nearly slipped off his chair. You could see it in his eyes. He wasn't just entertained, he was floored. And coming from Carson, that meant everything. The wildest part? Sammy wasn't doing a routine. He was just playing, testing his range, daring the crowd, and Johnny to keep up. No controversy, no mishaps, just a moment of spontaneous genius that even Johnny Carson, the man who'd seen it all, couldn't predict. And next up, a Hollywood icon pranks Johnny in a foreign language, and Johnny has no idea what to do. Number 15. Arnold Schwarzenegger only speaks German. When Arnold Schwarzenegger strolled onto Johnny's stage in the mid-80s, the audience expected the usual charm and movie promos. Instead, they got confusion. From the moment Johnny asked his first question, Arnold responded in fluent, rapid-fire German. Not just a greeting or a phrase, full sentences, serious tone, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Carson blinked, paused, looked toward the audience like, did anyone else just see that? But here's the brilliance. Instead of stopping the bit, Johnny leaned in. He started replying in total gibberish. Fake German, complete nonsense, hand gestures, dramatic nods, the whole act. And Arnold, he kept it going, never breaking. The crowd was in hysterics. One of the most bizarre language pranks in Tonight Show history was unfolding live, and Carson played it beautifully, like he was in on it from the start, even though he clearly wasn't. Eventually, Arnold broke the game, laughed, and explained he just wanted to see how Johnny would react. Carson's response:
"You're lucky I didn't call security."
In a show known for tight timing and rehearsed interviews, this was a moment of pure, unfiltered chaos, with 2 pros rolling with it like jazz musicians. Next, the weirdest magic trick Johnny ever saw. And it came from a comedian's fly. Ready for number 14? Number 14. Steve Martin's absurd magic routine, the Great Fly-Dini. When Steve Martin walked onto Johnny's stage in 1980 and calmly announced he'd be performing a magic act, nobody could have guessed what was coming. This wasn't rabbits in hats or card tricks. This was Steve Martin at the height of his absurdist powers. He stepped forward, unzipped his fly, and pulled out an egg, then a salt shaker, then a ringing telephone. Each item more ridiculous than the last, all emerging from the same place, while Steve kept a deadly serious face like this was the most elegant magic show on earth. At first, Johnny stood back, playing the straight man. But as the act escalated, you could see it happen. His poker face cracked. His shoulders started shaking. And by the time Steve reached in and pulled out a tiny hand that waved to the audience, Johnny was doubled over, tears streaming, completely at the mercy of the madness. What made it legendary wasn't just the trick, it was that Carson was genuinely caught off guard. After thousands of comedy acts, almost nothing surprised him anymore. But Steve's bizarre commitment tore through that wall. It was a perfect collision of the surreal and the unscripted, proof that Johnny didn't need control to make a moment work. Sometimes, the best thing he could do was just lose it. And next, Johnny's sacred monologue gets ambushed in the most unexpected way. Ready for number 13? Number 13. Johnny's monologue, hijacked by Don Rickles. The Tonight Show's opening monologue was sacred. It was Johnny's spotlight, his rhythm, his domain. So when Don Rickles hijacked it mid-joke, the audience didn't know whether to laugh or panic. It started like any other night. Johnny stepped out, launched into his first joke, and then from backstage came a heckle. A familiar voice. Loud, rude, Jewish New Yorker brutal. "That's the joke? I flew here for this." The crowd erupted. Johnny froze, then smirked. Without missing a beat, he broke every protocol. He stopped the monologue, walked right off the stage, and dragged Rickles out before he was even scheduled to appear. Rickles played it innocent, sitting in the guest chair with mock confusion. "What? I was just commenting. America deserves better jokes." What followed was 5 minutes of absolute chaos. Johnny trying to return to his monologue, Rickles interrupting every second, the camera crew barely keeping up, and the audience screaming, clapping, completely out of control. Carson was laughing, but you could tell he was also shaken. Rickles had just done the one thing you're never supposed to do, steal the spotlight before your name's even announced. It was the perfect storm of disrespect and brilliance, and Carson loved every second of it. Next up, a rebellious comic slips something past the censors, and Johnny knows exactly what just happened. Ready for number 12? Number 12. George Carlin pushes the censors on live TV. You never knew what George Carlin might say, and that was exactly the problem. He wasn't just a comic, he was a verbal grenade with a smirk, ready to detonate whatever line TV standards tried to draw. And on one unforgettable night in the late 70s, Carlin went off script in a way that left NBC executives sweating. The interview started calm. Johnny asked about Carlin's new tour, his latest material. But George, he had other plans. With a perfectly straight face, he launched into a bit about language, how networks allow certain insults but not others. The crowd laughed. Then, mid-rant, he dropped a word. Not one of the 7 dirty words. Not technically bannable, but close enough to make the room go silent. Johnny stiffened. The laughter died for a second. Then Johnny, with his signature timing, turned to the audience and said, "Well, there go my sponsors." Boom. The tension exploded into laughter. Johnny knew exactly what happened. Carlin had baited the edge of the rules on purpose, live in front of millions. It wasn't just a joke, it was a test of television's limits. And Carson? He didn't shut it down. He rode the wave. That moment marked the beginning of Carlin becoming a true outlaw comic, and Carson letting late night grow up a little. Next, a wild animal climbs where no animal ever should, and Johnny completely loses it. Ready for number 11? Number 11. The monkey that climbed Johnny's head. Of all the unpredictable guests Johnny welcomed over the decades, wild animals were always the most dangerous. And this time, one of them made Johnny the stage. It started innocently. Animal expert Joan Embury brought out a tiny capuchin monkey, dressed in a little vest, perched sweetly on her arm. The audience awed. Johnny leaned in for a closer look, and everything seemed under control. Until it wasn't. In a flash, the monkey leapt off Joan's arm, landed on Johnny's desk, and climbed straight up his suit, perching right on top of his head. The audience lost it. Johnny froze, deadpan. He sat there, hands folded like a statue, eyes staring into the camera, as if silently pleading, "Don't move, don't breathe, maybe it'll go away." The monkey, clearly having the time of its life, began playing with Carson's hair, tugging on his tie, and even tried sticking its tiny fingers in Johnny's ear. Absolute chaos. But Johnny, ever the pro, turned it into comedy gold. He didn't panic, didn't flinch. Instead, he delivered one of his most famous lines. "This is still better than some of my guests." It was unexpected, unscripted, and completely out of his control. And that's why it became one of the most replayed clips in Tonight Show history. Coming up next, a musical guest who stuns everyone and breaks every rule in television while doing it. Ready for number 10? Number 10. Tiny Tim's televised wedding. Chaos in a tuxedo. The Tonight Show had seen musical guests before, but none like Tiny Tim, the ukulele-playing, falsetto-singing oddball who looked like he stepped out of another dimension. Still, no one expected Johnny Carson to say yes when Tiny Tim asked if he could get married on the show. Yes, married, in front of a live studio audience, on national television. And Johnny? He agreed. On December 17, 1969, millions tuned in to witness one of the most surreal moments in late-night history. The band was in tuxedos. Carson played it straight as the officiant. Tiny Tim, dressed in a floral print tux, waited nervously beside Miss Vicky, his teenage bride. It felt like a parody, but it wasn't. The vows were real. The kiss was real. The awkwardness, very real. At one point, a stagehand knocked over a bouquet. Another crew member walked into the shot. Johnny tried to maintain order, but everything was slightly off, like a fever dream wrapped in wedding cake frosting. And yet, the ratings? Unbelievable. Over 40 million people watched that night, making it one of the highest-rated Tonight Show episodes ever. It wasn't just insane because it was weird. It was insane because Johnny, normally the king of control, let the circus take over the tent, and America couldn't look away. Next up, Johnny's old friend shows up without warning and completely wrecks the set. Ready for number 9? Number 9. Burt Reynolds and Dom DeLuise's talk show food fight. Sometimes chaos doesn't come from wild animals or live weddings. Sometimes it comes from two grown men with pies. Johnny was mid-interview with Burt Reynolds when out came his frequent co-conspirator, Dom DeLuise. The two were always trouble on set, but this time, they went fully rogue. Dom entered with a smirk and a cream pie in hand. Johnny joked, "Careful with that." Too late. In one swift motion, Dom smacked the pie straight into Burt's face. Silence. Then uproarious laughter. But Burt wasn't letting that slide. He calmly reached down, grabbed another pie, and nailed Johnny right in the suit. The studio exploded. Johnny, shocked and splattered, tried to regain composure, but Burt wasn't done. He tackled Dom with a third pie, sending him to the floor, covered in cream. Cameras shook. The audience couldn't breathe from laughing. Johnny stood there, drenched, blinking through whipped cream, muttering, "This is why we don't do live TV." The cleanup took longer than the segment, but the moment became late-night legend, a perfect unscripted storm of friendship, timing, and pure mayhem. Coming up next, a moment so tense, so unfiltered, Johnny nearly pulled the plug live on air. Ready for number 8? Number 8. The fake psychic. Johnny called out on live TV. Johnny Carson wasn't just a comedian, he was a magician at heart, which meant he had zero patience for frauds hiding behind cheap tricks. So when so-called psychic Uri Geller appeared on the show in 1973, claiming he could bend spoons with his mind, Johnny was ready. But this time, he didn't just host the segment. He set a trap. Before the show, Johnny consulted with famed skeptic James Randi. Together they arranged for all of Geller's props to be provided by the show. No sleight-of-hand tools, no swapped objects. Everything controlled. The result? Dead silence. Geller sat there, sweating. For 22 agonizing minutes, he fidgeted, stalled, blamed negative energy, and tried to dodge every test Johnny presented. The audience watched in stunned confusion. Johnny never got angry. He never raised his voice. He just waited, letting the fraud unravel himself. By the end, it was clear, Geller had nothing. and Carson's quiet dismantling of the act became one of the most legendary takedowns in TV history. If he could really bend metal with his mind, Johnny later said, he wouldn't need to fake it. It was tense, it was awkward, and it was unforgettable. Carson didn't just entertain, he protected the audience from being duped. Next, a real-life mobster walks on stage, and Johnny has to decide whether to run or roll with it. Ready for number 7? Number 7. Frank Sinatra brings a mobster to The Tonight Show. Johnny Carson was no stranger to celebrity surprises, but this one had underworld tension written all over it. It was 1976, and Frank Sinatra, rarely a talk show guest, made a shock appearance on The Tonight Show. Johnny was thrilled until Frank said he wanted to bring out a close friend. Enter Don Rickles? Nope. Out walked Jimmy the Weasel Fratiano, a man widely believed to be a mob hitman with deep mafia ties. The audience had no idea who he was, but Johnny definitely did. Suddenly, Carson's smile tightened. His tone shifted. This wasn't a bit. This wasn't some zany character. This was a man with an FBI file longer than Sinatra's discography, on live national television. Frank laughed it off. Jimmy played nice. But Johnny? He played it very, very carefully. He asked safe questions. He avoided eye contact. He even made a few half-hearted jokes, but his eyes kept darting toward the side of the stage as if waiting for security or divine intervention. After the segment, Carson reportedly said backstage, "I thought I was about to sleep with the fishes on NBC. The moment was surreal. A mob associate on late night, a legendary crooner brushing shoulders with danger, and a host trying not to end up in cement shoes." Coming up next, a guest walks off mid-interview, leaving Johnny staring at an empty chair, and America speechless. Ready for number 6? Number 6. The guest who walked out and never came back. Late-night interviews are usually playful, even when tense. But one night, Johnny Carson asked the wrong question, and a guest decided she'd had enough. It was actress Shelley Winters, known for her fiery personality and refusal to take nonsense from anyone. Johnny, always the charming devil, made a joke about her weight, one he'd probably gotten away with 100 times on other guests. But Shelley? She went stone cold. She stared at Johnny for a second, then took off her mic, stood up and walked right off the stage. No warning, no punchline, just silence and the echo of her heels disappearing backstage. The audience gasped. Johnny looked around, unsure if it was a bit. It wasn't. He tried to save it with humor. "Well, I guess she's gone to get a sandwich." But the damage was done. The crowd gave an uneasy laugh, but the tension never fully lifted. What made it legendary wasn't just the walkout. It was what happened afterward. Shelley never returned. Not to the interview, not to the show, ever. Johnny sent flowers, issued a public apology. But she held her ground, saying, "There's funny and then there's rude." He crossed the line. It was a stark reminder. Even the king of late night could get burned live, and sometimes there was no coming back. Next, a Hollywood legend arrives completely drunk, and Johnny has to steer the entire segment without sinking the ship. Ready for number 5? Number 5. Oliver Reed shows up drunk and derails everything. Johnny Carson had dealt with oddballs, eccentrics, and unpredictable comedians, but nothing prepared him for Oliver Reed. The British actor, known for his tough guy roles and legendary drinking habits, showed up on The Tonight Show absolutely plastered. Not tipsy, not playful. From the moment he sat down, Johnny knew he was in trouble. Oliver tried to answer questions, but kept interrupting himself, veering into strange stories about Roman gladiators, bar fights, and how real actors never wear underwear. He spilled his water. He lit a cigarette, despite the no-smoking rule, and at one point he leaned over to Carson and asked, loudly, "Have you ever kissed a man, Johnny?" The audience gasped. Johnny blinked. But here's the genius of Carson. Instead of cutting to commercial or panicking, he leaned back, smiled, and replied, "Only when I've been offered a movie deal." Boom. The audience exploded. Johnny turned a disaster into gold. The segment ended early. NBC reportedly banned Reed from returning, but the clip lived on, passed around for years as the moment Johnny outclassed chaos with nothing but timing and wit. Coming up next, a shock guest no one expected because they weren't invited at all. Ready for number 4? Number 4, the streaker who hijacked the show. You expect a few surprises on live television, but no one expected this. It was a regular taping night. Johnny was mid-monologue, working the crowd, when suddenly a blur shot across the stage. A streaker, completely naked, sprinting behind Johnny with arms in the air like he'd won the Olympics. The audience screamed, gasped, then erupted into laughter. Carson, caught off guard, turned just in time to see a full moon flying stage left. Security scrambled, but the guy was fast and bold. He ran across the studio, through the camera shot, and even attempted to do a cartwheel before being tackled by security. And Johnny? He stood frozen for a beat, then delivered the most iconic line of the night. "Ladies and gentlemen, my next guest just flew in from the moon." The audience lost it. Even the crew couldn't stop laughing. NBC didn't know whether to censor or capitalize, but the clip made headlines the next morning. Streaker steals the spotlight from Carson. What made it truly insane wasn't just the nudity, it was how perfectly Johnny handled the chaos. Cool, quick, and composed. And somehow, funnier than the streaker himself. Coming up next, a Hollywood legend pulls a prank so bold, Johnny didn't know whether to laugh or punch the guy. Ready for number 3? Number 3. Don Rickles destroys Johnny's set, then gets caught. There are pranksters, and then there's Don Rickles, the undisputed king of insult comedy and Carson's longtime frenemy. One night Johnny was off, and actor Bob Newhart was guest hosting The Tonight Show. Don Rickles, as a guest, decided to get a little too comfortable. During a segment, Rickles grabbed Johnny's desk. Yes, the iconic Tonight Show desk, and broke it live on air. He laughed it off. No big deal. Except, Johnny didn't know. The next night, Carson returned, sat down, and immediately noticed the damage. His desk was wobbling like a card table at a cheap casino. Then he heard what happened. And that's when it got legendary. Johnny stormed across the NBC studios with cameras following straight into the set of CPO Sharkey, the sitcom Rickles was filming at the time. The studio audience had no idea what was happening. Suddenly, Johnny barges in mid-scene, holding a broken piece of his desk like a weapon. Rickles looked up, stunned. Johnny shouted, "You broke my desk, you hockey puck." The crowd roared. Rickles collapsed in laughter. It was chaos, unscripted, and comedy gold. This wasn't just a prank, it was two late-night legends colliding, and the audience got a front-row seat. Up next, a guest so out of control, Johnny had to physically remove him from the stage. Ready for number 2? Number 2. Johnny Carson physically removes an out-of-control guest. Johnny Carson was the king of keeping things smooth. But one night, even he had to draw the line with his own 2 hands. The guest, Ray Combs, a fellow comedian and then host of Family Feud. At first, it was all laughs. Ray was animated, bouncing off the walls, doing voices, tossing out punchlines like a machine gun. The audience was loving it. But Johnny, he wasn't. As Ray kept interrupting Johnny's setup, talking over other guests, and even grabbing Johnny's coffee mug, things started to get tense. Then, in a bizarre moment, Combs jumped up, walked behind the desk, and tried to sit in Carson's chair. Big mistake. Johnny gave a tight smile, stood up slowly, and said, "You know what, Ray? Why don't we take a little break?" But they didn't cut to commercial. Instead, Johnny grabbed Ray by the elbow, gently but firmly, and walked him off the stage live. No jokes, no music, just stunned silence and the shuffle of shoes backstage. The audience clapped, but nervously. Ray never came back. Johnny never mentioned it again, but the message was loud and clear. This is my house. And no matter how funny you were, you didn't take the throne from the king. Coming up next, the one most insane moment on Johnny Carson. The one that made history, broke the rules, and changed late night forever. Number 1. The night Johnny Carson quit. Live without warning. Of all the jaw-dropping moments on The Tonight Show, nothing compares to the night Johnny Carson almost walked away for good, right in front of millions. It was May 22, 1991. A regular show, regular monologue, regular laughter. Then, without warning, Johnny's tone shifted. He looked into the camera and said calmly, almost casually, "I've given it a lot of thought, and this is going to be my last year hosting The Tonight Show." No build-up, no press release, no warning to NBC. The audience froze. The band stopped. Even Ed McMahon, Johnny's right-hand man for decades, looked blindsided. The silence in the studio was deafening. And then, thunderous applause. Some fans cried, others stood and clapped, unsure if this was a joke or the end of an era. But Johnny didn't smile. He wasn't joking. He was done. He had quietly made up his mind, told no one, and chose to announce it the only way he knew how, live, with class, grace, and total control. In that moment, Johnny Carson did what no one else in TV history ever had. He left on his own terms, without scandal or spectacle, reminding the world that even kings know when to exit the stage. It wasn't loud, it wasn't messy, but it was the most insane, unforgettable, and iconic moment of his legendary career. And just like that, the curtains began to close. And there you have it, 16 of the most insane moments ever witnessed on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. From unexpected walkouts and drunken disasters, to mobsters, streakers, and jaw-dropping pranks, Johnny didn't just host a late-night show. He ruled a live circus, where anything could happen, and often did. But through all the madness, one thing remained constant: Johnny Carson's brilliance. His timing, his wit, his grace under pressure. He didn't just survive chaos, he turned it into comedy gold. So whether it was a guest storming off, a desk being destroyed, or an on-air goodbye that stunned the world, Johnny handled it all with a smirk, a sharp line, and a twinkle in his eye. That's why, decades later, we're still talking about these moments. Because they weren't just TV, they were legend. If you enjoyed the ride, let us know in the comments. Which Carson moment shocked you the most? And don't forget, there's always more madness to uncover. Until next time, keep the laughs rolling. And remember, there was only one Johnny.